People of the internet! Welcome back to another video. It is I, Don Thomas, back in here with another one. As always, folks, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for the support on this channel. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's topic, folks. Got a video pulled up here. Comes from CNBC, entitled, "What Happens If Trump Dismantles the Department of Education?" So of course, as you guys know, Donald Trump is set to take office next week, January 20th, where he will officially become the president of the United States. So I've been hearing some talks about this. Of course, Trump has said a lot of things. Again, I'm not really the biggest guy in politics, as you guys know, but I kind of just do a little surface level overview of the things that I've been hearing in terms of his policies and things that he's proposing. And he has spoken how he is looking to destroy the Department of Education or make changes and give it back to the state, I think. Give, schools the power to be controlled by the states, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, I saw this title. Of course, you guys know how I feel about, I guess, just higher education as a whole. And, we've been, previous videos, I discussed how there's a decline in freshman enrollment in college campuses, things of that nature. I do believe that education and even just work is looking a lot different. What we once constituted as work and school starting to look a lot different with the advancement of AI technology, with the decline in the workforce and things of that nature, this and the other. So I see this topic, of course, it strikes my interest. I'll share my thoughts. I encourage you guys to share your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let's get into it.
The Department of Education handled about $229 billion of the $9.7 trillion that Congress allocated for federal agencies in 2024. That comes to about 2.4%. Despite the department's small size, it's taken on an outsized role in political rhetoric.
We will ultimately eliminate the federal Department of Education and send education back to Wisconsin and back to the states.
We're seeing sort of broader attacks on public education, and an extension of that is that we see attacks on the most visible symbol of public education, which is the U.S. Department of Education.
Where someone lands on this issue may come down to whether they believe regulation from the federal government is onerous on state governments, or if federal regulation serves as oversight that provides protection to children.
The Department of Education has often been described as a gargantuan bank with a third-rate policy shop attached, because the biggest chunk of the money they manage there is over $1 trillion in federal student loans. I don't know that folks who work for the Washington, D.C. Department of Education are necessarily the folks best equipped to oversee and manage a portfolio of that size.
What I'm concerned about is how these billionaires who want tax cuts are going to take funding away from kids with special needs and kids who are poor and kids who are going to college for the first time. So when you take a sledgehammer to these kind of programs that the federal government pays for, but most of them are actually implemented in states and localities all throughout America, that's a problem.
All right, let's pause it right there. Okay, cool. So that was educational for me because, again, I wasn't even too familiar, honestly. You guys know, as I said a million times before on this channel, that I'm not the biggest politics guy, and I don't really give too much attention to laws and legislations and this, that, and the other. And some people say, "Oh, you should, man. Aren't you an American citizen? You should be aware of the policies that are happening in your state and your government." Yeah. As I've said before, man, these people are gonna do what they want to do. That's just been my opinion from the jump. Whether you vote Democrat, whether you vote Republican, I think these people are going to do what's always best for them, and then we just kind of have to deal with it. That's just been my thesis for the longest time. So, of course, you saw that one clip where the lady was talking about, taking the powers from the rich guys. I guess, of course, they showed Elon, they showed Trump, and then, of course, you're like just the tax benefits and this, that, and the other, all the things that maybe comes from moving that power from the federal state or the federal, I guess, government, whatever the case is, and give that power back to the individual states in terms of the funding for schools. So, of course, you saw just the different programs that come with schools. So after school programs and the resources, and I think this maybe all falls under, the salaries of teachers and things of that nature, children with special needs and different things that fall under that, I guess, jurisdiction. Basically, it looks like they are trying to find a means of switching the power back over to the state. Let's watch a little bit more, get a little bit more insight. Of course, I would always advise anybody who's more knowledgeable in this topic than I am to definitely leave your comments down in the comment section below. What do you make of this so far? What's your understanding of our current education system here in this nation. Is it a pro to give the power back to the states? What are the pros? What are the cons? Do we leave it with the federal government? What are your thoughts on that? Let's watch a little bit more so I can get educated a little bit more on this whole topic itself, myself as well too.
Here's what the Department of Education does and what the future of education could look like in the U.S. The Federal Department of Education has existed in some form since 1867, initially created to gather information to help states develop effective school systems. The modern department was established as a cabinet-level agency in 1979 after Jimmy Carter ran on separating the agency from what is now the Department of Health and Human Services. Some Republicans have been calling for the department to be closed since it was first established. The calls don't seem to be slowing down. In 2024, 64% of Republicans and Republican-leaning Americans have a negative view of the Department of Education.
I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states.
The fight over the future of the Department of Education is symbolic of an ideological divide regarding how involved the federal government should be in regulating education.
The tone of the talking point has changed. Sometimes it's been about just sort of pulling the federal government out of education entirely. Sometimes it has felt like it's a bit more antagonistic toward public schools in general. And I think now we're in an era where it feels like it's more antagonistic and not just about reducing costs.
The Department of Education is offensive to anybody who's kind of a small government conservative because it creates a permanent infrastructure in Washington that's always trying to weigh in on what states and communities and colleges should be doing for their part.
The U.S. Department of Education has become a symbol of public education and public schools across the country. And what we've seen in polling ever since the COVID shutdowns is Americans, and particularly Republicans, have lost a lot of trust in U.S. public schools. And there's now a big division in how Democrats feel about public schools versus how Republicans feel about public schools. And I think the department has become a symbol of that.
In reality, states and localities already have immense power when it comes to educating the students in their state and in their district. They already get to sort of set the rules on what they're teaching curriculum-wise.
I don't think we need the Department of Education. I'd be fine if it didn't exist, but I can also count to 60. And to dismantle a federal department, you need an act of Congress.
Let's pause right there. All right, cool. So again, I'm learning a lot in watching this. I hope you guys are as well too. If this strikes your interest. Interesting. So, all right, giving the power back to the state in terms of letting the state determine what the schools can do with the spending and the finances and the curriculum that students are learning. I'll say this, I grew up in a public school. I went to public school. I went to a pretty diverse public school, elementary, middle school, and high school. And I know people have their gripes with like just the public school setting, depending on the neighborhoods and this, that, and the other. Of course, most parents want their children to go to private schools or whatever the case is. And when I just kind of think about just the climate of our world today in terms of, again, they were speaking about the curriculums that are being taught in some of these schools as well too. Now that I know what I know, I personally do feel like just the education system as a whole, I'm seeing why there's a growing number of people saying, well, they want to homeschool their children. Like, oh, I'm taking my children out of public schools. I've been hearing that narrative a lot, I guess, across social media in terms of just parents feeling like they are better off teaching their children themselves and taking their children out of public schools. I am not opposed to that idea as well, too. I feel like if I was to take on fatherhood and have children of my own, then I, too, would be looking primarily into homeschooling my children. Because, again, and maybe this is a little bit off of the topic of what they're talking about here, but it's kind of still on topic in terms of just the curriculum that's being taught in schools and the teachers that you're sending your children off to school to be taught by seems to be shifting because, again, people are implementing their own ideologies, their own philosophies, their own ways of life into the public school system or just the curriculum, and that may or may not be aligned with how you are training your children and raising them up in our current times. So I've seen a lot of situations where, and again, this could all just be social media rhetoric, whatever the cases, but I have seen some situations where teachers are teaching children things that I don't think their parents are signing off on. Like, teachers are bringing their way of life into the classroom and implementing it themselves into the curriculum, and parents have little to no say-so as to what's being taught to their children. And again, I say this a lot of the times as well, too. If you're a parent sending your kid off to school, it's your responsibility to some degree to know who your child's teacher is and what is being taught in that classroom. Do you approve of those things? Do your philosophies and the way you're bringing up your child in your household align with how your child is being taught in the classroom as well too? A lot of situations it does not. Now again, of course, that may be one of the gripes that people have with this whole situation of the Department of Education, this, that, and the other. I am still trying to get a better understanding of, the federal government owning it versus the states. Again, it just sounds like it all comes down to this money to me. Money, power, decisions, who's it best for, this, that, and the other. But all of it seems very interesting, again, being mindful of the times that we're living in our current society today. What else? Let me see something.
24 is to rein in wasteful federal spending, but abolishing a federal agency doesn't automatically turn off the spending tap.
All the money the Department of Education has really is the money that's authorized by Congress. All of these programs will continue to exist and get money unless Congress voted to stop funding them. The debate about the future of the department is symbolic. What really matters is what we decide to do about the staffing and funding of these assorted programs.
When asked for comment, a Trump-Vance transition spokesperson wrote in part in a statement to CNBC, President Trump believes that school choice is the civil rights issue of our time. By returning education back to the states where it belongs, President Trump will improve academic excellence for all students. The Department of Education did not respond to CNBC's request for comment.
What does the Department of Education do? Very good question. Let's find out.
Is dispersing federal student loans and managing loan forgiveness programs.
The U.S. Department of Education, in a lot of ways, it operates like a bank. If you're looking at a full portfolio of loans and all the money that flows through the department, it is quite large. If you're looking in terms of what is the size of the department staff, it's about 4,400 employees. It's small relative to other agencies in the federal government. So it has kind of a small staffing footprint.
More than $114 billion of the $229 billion that passes through the department goes toward the federal direct student loan program, according to usaspending.gov. The department is also responsible for issuing Pell Grants, which are usually granted to undergraduate students on a needs basis and typically do not have to be repaid. It also manages Title I funds, a federal aid program for K-12 schools serving low-income students. In the fiscal year 2024, Congress allocated $18.4 billion to the program.
It is a program that provides funds particularly to students who live in concentrated poverty. And part of the reason for that is that if we were to have education systems that relied purely on local and state funding, you would see these kind of vast inequalities in how much funding is available to schools. And so the federal government plays this role of kind of offsetting that.
Again, sounds like a bunch of money that's being, some would say, misused or, improperly managed. We're talking about billion-dollar salaries with the staff. I didn't even know how. So he said about 4,400 staff members, of course, in the Department of Education. Interesting. Again, a lot of folks would say, well, see, if you vote properly, people would say it's the problem of how you vote. People would say it's, just where you live, the part of America where you live and this, that, and the other is what's going to constitute your child's experience when going off to school. That may or may not be true. I've been saying this for some time, man. I feel like the powers that be, the institutions that have been here for centuries before, have if it ain't broke, don't fix it mindset. In a lot of situations, we've seen systems that are definitely broken, but for some reason, it's like pulling teeth to get them adjusted and caught up to our current times. So this might just be another situation where they might just be stuck in their ways, as they say, and maybe not show any interest at all to fixing the problems that come within our education system. Again, maybe I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible, being that I myself don't necessarily have kids, but of course I have, family members, nieces, this and the other who are still in school. So I know this is going to affect people with children to some degree. Like I said, folks, again, Trump's coming into office next week. Trump has plans of dismantling the Department of Education, as he's mentioned, which is, again, taking it out of the federal government's hands and giving the power back to the states. What does that specifically look like for each state? If that does happen, I'm not too sure. But some people are for it. Some people are against it. But I want to hear your thoughts, folks. What do you make of it? Again, anybody that's more knowledgeable in this topic, please educate me nicely down in the comment section. I'm never going to come off as an expert in certain fields. If I don't know something, I don't know something. But I find things that strike my interest so that way I can be a little bit more knowledgeable And of course, use my platform to open up constructive discourse down in the comment section. Those are my thoughts. Of course, I want to hear yours down in the comment section below. As always, the likes, the comments, the subscribes are all greatly appreciated. I will catch you on the next one.